If you ask people, okay, well, everyone knows the stock market crashed in 1929. When did it regain those highs? How long did that take? The answer is 25 years. It was
1954.
It was 1954 before
Right.
the market recovered from 1929. Now, it doesn't mean there weren't gains along the way or you couldn't make money. You could. But if you say, oh, I'll just sit tight and wait till it comes back, well, a lot of people didn't live long enough. They didn't live 20. They never saw their money back because they didn't live 25 more years. So that's a real bear market. It's happened before. And so the point is you need to be prepared for things like that. And no one alive, but very few people alive have seen anything like that. So I think that's the right framework to put it in.
The current crisis is not like 2008 or even 1929. The new depression that has emerged from the COVID pandemic is the worst economic crisis in U.S. history. Most fired employees will remain redundant. Bankruptcies will be common, and banks will buckle under the weight of bad debts. Deflation, debt, and demography will wreck any chance of recovery, and social disorder will follow closely on the heels of market chaos. The happy talk from Wall Street and the White House is an illusion. The worst is yet to come. James Rickards, a prolific writer who has worked in senior roles at several financial institutions, quotes with approval John Maynard Keynes' definition of depression as a chronic condition of subnormal activity for a considerable period without any marked tendency either towards recovery or towards complete collapse. He makes the important point that depressions are as much psychological as numeric. Risk aversion induced by the pandemic may entrench a high-saving, low-consumption mentality. Jim argues that when unemployment declines, it will be from such a high level that hard times will persist for millions of workers. It warns of slow growth for 30 years. Some might say that 30-year forecasts are for the birds and that this is anyway unduly pessimistic. Yet there are grounds for thinking that it might not be, especially if government policy is ill-judged. Since at least the financial crisis of 2007 and 2008, growth has been excessively debt-dependent. The fiscal response to the coronavirus ensures that debt-to-GDP ratios are ballooning. In the short and medium term, deflationary pressure will be intense. Companies with stretched balance sheets do not invest, which was the case in Japan for years after the bursting of its property and stock market bubble in 1990. For governments, there is a risk of a premature return to austerity to reduce debt ratios. At the same time, productivity growth in the developed world has been poor since the financial crisis. This performance will be worsened because of diminished physical and human capital accumulation as a result of SARS-CoV-2. The remedies are structural reform and infrastructure investment. Yet part of the purpose of the central bank's quantitative easing since the financial crisis was to buy time for structural reform. Very little happened. And can policymakers be trusted to use debt to finance growth-enhancing investments? Jim Rickards joins the radio show host of Rich Dad, Poor Dad, Robert Kiyosaki, in an interview that explores the depth of the recession, its consequences, and long-term speculation. Also, he discusses the effect of COVID-19 on present economic situations and the Russia-Ukraine war. Let us now get into the video and listen to Rickards' view on the aforementioned topics. As you watch, endeavor to like the video, subscribe, and make sure to leave your comments below.
List might be, pardon me, my list might be quite different from other people's lists. This time of year, the forecasting business is at an all-time high. Everyone's got, stock market projections and bond market projections or things to look out for in 2023, and that's fine. A lot of good contributors from a lot of sources, but based on probably the way I combine not just economics, but also geopolitics, bring them together. They've always been connected to some extent, but they've never been more interconnected, more merged than they are right now. And so I think bringing that perspective will maybe give us a different list, but that's a good thing because we can contribute something the viewers might not be hearing elsewhere. I would drop one footnote to your introductory remark, Robert, about a younger generation. Yeah, 30, no reason to pick on 30-year-olds. If you're under 50, you've never seen some of the bear markets, something like the Great Depression or even 1987, the stock market dropped. One footnote I would drop is that you said people haven't seen these kind of market crashes. Well, not the Great Depression, that's for sure. But they have seen market crashes, but they've also seen it come back every single time. And that's what's different. So yeah, we got through 1998, we got through the dot-com crash, we got through 2008, we got through 2020 and COVID. There's actually a good size market drawdown in 2018 between October 1st, 2018 and Christmas Eve, what I call the Christmas Eve massacre. Stock markets dropped 20% in under 3 months when the Fed kept raising interest rates, even though the economy was weakening. So they have seen those, but every single time it came back, even in COVID, March, April 2020, the stock market went down 30%. It did. I mean, just almost straight down. But by September, we were back to new all-time highs. And so it's not that they've never seen that kind of volatility, but they learned the wrong lesson, which is it always comes back. And we know why, because the Fed bails you out, the Fed floods the zone with money, the Fed talks it up, et cetera. The first thing on my list is the China COVID situation. Now, let me just kind of give a quick background and I'll explain what China's doing and why it's going to fail and why it's a really, really big deal. For the last 3 years, they've been pursuing what's called the zero COVID policy. And zero COVID means what it says. So like if there's one person who gets infected, they quarantine you in your apartment. And using extreme measures in some cases. They've actually had teams come in hazmat suits and weld steel I-beams to the outside of your door so you couldn't get outside your apartment. If 7 or 8 people get it, they shut down a whole neighborhood. 30 people, they shut down a whole city. We're talking Shanghai, 26 million people, Beijing, 22 million people, and other cities, Xi'an, Chongqing. I've actually been to Wuhan, I've been to all these cities, and they're huge. Nobody in, nobody out. Or if you do, you have to have a negative COVID test, but it can't be more than 48 hours old. So you got to get tested 3 times a week. And they have testing tents every 3 blocks in the city, and masks and all. By the way, none of this stuff works, by the way, but they make you do it. They have COVID concentration camps where they ship people outside the city limits and put them in quarantine, et cetera. Extremely, extremely damaging to the economy. Can you contain the COVID? Yeah, but at a multi-billion-dollar cost, not to mention social disruption, et cetera. And it doesn't work in the long run. It can contain in the short run at enormous cost. Absolutely does not work in the long run. Well, but it was all done for political reasons because Chairman Xi Jinping wanted to get his 3rd term, unprecedented, by the way, since Mao Zedong, as the new emperor, the new communist emperor of China. So, so he did. He got the 3rd term, and here we are. So suddenly there are massive riots. Demonstrations all over the country, breaking down barricades, tearing down testing tents, storming through cities, hanging banners. And if you're the leadership, do they care about people's welfare? No, but they remember Tiananmen Square, 1989, when they put it down by killing thousands of people. No one knows how many, but they massacred 3 or 4, perhaps more thousand people in and around Tiananmen Square to suppress that. And they saw it sort of happening again. So they threw in the towel on COVID. They said, okay, we're just going to let it go, let it rip. They don't put it that way, but that's what they're doing. And they're saying, okay, now you can self-quarantine. You don't need tests. You don't need travel permissions. You can just go, but, be careful, wash your hands, basically. So what's going to happen next? Well, if you combine Russia and Ukraine, they provide 25% of global exports of wheat, 35% global exports of barley. Russia provides a large percentage of global fertilizer exports. So the answer is yes, absolutely. And if you look at it from the importing point of view, you say, okay, so Russia and Ukraine are 25% of the world's exports of wheat. It doesn't mean they grow that much wheat. It just means they export that much wheat. The U.S. grows more wheat, but we use it ourselves. We feed cows and pigs and make ethanol and do all kinds of other things with it. But Russia and Ukraine export a lot of it.
The zero COVID policy of China has been one of the major causes of the declining economic progress of the Asian giant. Even after complaints about the unfeasibility of the policy, the Chinese government still progressed into a zero COVID policy which shut down most of the economy as there was no labor market and no product market as well. Ukraine and Russia are among the most important producers and exporters of arable crops in the world, particularly cereals and oilseeds. Production of animal products, however, mainly supplies their domestic markets. According to Rickards, a large number of food importing countries, many of which fall into the low-income food deficit countries, LIFCs, category, rely on Russian and Ukrainian food supplies to meet their consumption needs. Several countries, for instance, receive over half and up to 100% of their wheat imports from Russia and Ukraine. This includes a few countries already struggling with internal conflicts and precarious food security situations. These countries need to find alternative sources of supply to meet their consumption needs. The recession has started, and Jim warns that some may not live long enough to see things back up again, just like in the cases of the Great Depression. Therefore, you can only get prepared now and not put any hope on the Fed's thin air money policy and quantitative printing. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to hit the like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Thanks for watching.